Hi, Mark Renshaw here, and it's a little story about my bike and bike collection. So this is a Cervélo S5 that I was racing in Team Dimension Data. This bike is from 2018, so my second last year as a professional. So quite funny, it's come full circle. I'm now an ambassador for Cervélo here in Australia, and I've got the opportunity to ride the new S5. Which they developed the same year that we had this bike, but as it turns out with sponsorship and that kind of thing, they didn't give it to us because they were changing sponsorships and changing teams, and Team Dimension Data was also changing sponsorship to BMC. A couple of big changes in that bike to this bike, but as you can see, running a Dura-Ace group set, we had Rotor, power meter and cranks, which I used for a few years during my career. Found them really underrated, so quite a nice power meter, a nice set of cranks. Going over the rest of the bike, obviously the ENVE wheel set is quite intimidating, big deep wheels, running the 7.8 set here, so 70mm in the front, 80mm in the rear in depth, with a Dura-Ace group set. Continental tyres, which I've used a lot in my career and really like. But all in all, Rob, it's a pretty clean bike and something that I was pretty happy with when I was racing.
You've since ridden the new S5, I imagine. I've ridden both as well. My memory of this one is that the post tended to slip a little bit, but I don't want to get distracted by that. I do know that there's a pretty significant mark for you, so maybe you had similar issues?
We had some similar issues. We had some issues with the seat dropping with the nose. We had some issues with the seat post going down, but they fixed those pretty quick. Nothing like a bit of carbon paste and just some gap filler, so they fixed those issues. The big difference in the bike is the front end between this model and the new model is they went to like a split stem on the front with an integrated handlebar, hidden cables, and of course hydraulic disc brakes, so that was like a big step up for the year after this bike. We continued to ride the rim brakes for a long time, until the death when Cervélo changed to disc brakes for the bike.
What I was trying to get to, and what I'm curious about your feedback on it, is that the new S5 to me actually, with the V-shape handlebar, that was the first bike where I thought, hang on a sec, there's real aero gains here. Like, it really felt that way to me, and I don't know if it was placebo. What about you as a bike racer?
I definitely think there's an advantage. There's an aero advantage. It kind of opens up that area through the front of the bike. It's very different to this bike. It's really different to ride. Of course, you've got like a wider stem. So for me, I'm personally a kind of rider that sprints pretty upright. So I don't ever hit my knees on the stem, but you can notice it's there. So all in all, I prefer kind of this single stem, but in saying that, aero is everything. Specialised have trademarked that. They've said it all along. Everybody agrees that aero is the big difference, and the new S5 is faster. So if it came to race day, I would probably pick the new bike over this old bike, even though the preference would be a single stem, just because you take that advantage in aerodynamics.
While we're on aero, you've been in the wind tunnel a few times, I'd imagine. You would have done it for the track, and you would have done it for the road, and you would have worked out all sorts of things. I was thinking about it this morning when I was driving out, but I'm pretty sure you were in the team in Manchester 2002 when it was the second team ever to go under 4 minutes in the team pursuit. Were your lessons being learned then, or did it come later in the career when things really did?
It probably was a little bit after that aerodynamics made like the big gains. That 2002, when we did break the world record, we were focused on the position on the bike, how to, bring your elbows in, curve up, make yourself more aerodynamic, but they weren't the big focuses on the bike yet. We saw those big changes in bikes come, a little bit later. We looked at some road bikes, so it wasn't until 2006 and 7 that we really saw pure aerodynamic road bikes. So even though the wind tunnel was around then, it was still really expensive, and it was more aimed at time trial positions.
And it was really Mark Cavendish who revolutionised the aero concept for sprinting, because as Bob Stapleton kept telling everyone, he's got that low frontal area, he can, Caleb Ewan's taken it to a new level, but it was Mark who started being the short squat sprinter. Not even Robbie, who isn't terribly tall, would get as low as what Mark did.
Cavendish was one of the first guys that got super low in the front, and of course it was a big difference because nobody'd really seen that in any sprinters. Even you mentioned Robbie was short, but he's surprisingly tall. He has quite a high seat height, so not even Robbie got that low. But yeah, lately Caleb Ewan's taken it to the next level again by getting right over the front of the bike, and then it makes it a little bit hard to handle the bike. So I don't think I'd want to be in that position and get a check off, some of the other sprinters, because you just don't have the time or the ability to react. But in saying that, I've never really had a problem with being too low. Sprinters often like to be very low because of, less frontal surface area, and in the end, that's what makes a difference with your higher speed in the end of a race. With sprinting, it's all about power, but still being aerodynamic. So, no matter how much power you do, you still have to be aero, and the smaller you can make that frontal surface area, the quicker you'll go, because you still have to be able to put out the 1,000 or 1,400, 500 watts that you need to do. So that's why they've seen that once they can get lower, it just reduces that amount. So you can't make everything skinnier because you don't have the ability to put the power out.
One last question on all of that. From the lessons in the wind tunnel and what you're trying to do when you're sprinting, is there anything that you could do deliberately while still squeezing out the power that you wanted to make yourself more efficient? I spoke with Greg Henderson about this, for example, and he's sort of, he likes to think outside the box, but, he still was saying you have to wrestle the bike anyway, so...
Well, the thing with road sprinting is it's a sudden burst of speed at the end of an endurance event. So you see on the track, when big track sprinters are sprinting, they're all in the seat. They're never sprinting out of the seat. Not only are they, because they're going around in circles, but it's more aero and they can put out just as much power in the seat. But on the road, you've got so many different factors that could be going up or downhill, riders coming left and right. So big things that you can do quickly are reducing the size of your handlebars. So we've gone from 42 to 40 to 38 to 36 centimetre centre to centre handlebars, and the height of the bars. There's a whole host of new handlebars coming out that are different shaped with the ability to close down that area. So all in all, there's not a lot to do in road sprinting other than get skinnier and get lower.
With this bike, we're one generation off contemporary, but the tyres are still super skinny, and they're super hard. What was the high pressure? What was the pressure you were racing at? We talked about going high pressure versus low pressure before, but
yeah, well, in Europe with the mechanics, you always talk in bar. It was anywhere from 6 to 7 bar in the tyres. I always like to put that little bit more, just to have that little bit more feeling underneath me. I found if I started letting too much pressure out, you just get a little bit too much movement in the corners. So, and the tyre felt slow when you were trying to roll on it. So as I mentioned before, there's Rolf Aldag. He looked at it in depth, probably more than any other person in the pro peloton, and he's a firm believer that less was more. But in a Continental, it just felt better with a little bit more pressure on those tyres. They just handled a little bit better.
Let's sort of go a little bit, if we could, on the commentary of disc brakes versus caliper brakes.
Yeah, I only had the ability to ride 1 year on disc brakes in the peloton. Look, honestly, big difference. The braking ability and strength of the brakes. You could see in my final year that you just had more brake underneath you in those crucial moments, especially when you're in a bunch of 200 and you're coming down a decent sized hill into a left-hand turn. You can tell the guys that had disc and didn't. So they speak a lot about the modulation and this kind of thing, but there's no doubt about it that they're a stronger braking than a rim brake. But you start to have the debate about weight, aerodynamics and all these kind of things. So there's still pluses and fours, but for me, just the ability in the braking is a lot more than what the rim brake was. So hence why majority of teams are going to it.
That's a good anecdote, and I wonder if we could just segue to the current world champion, Julian Alaphilippe, who is very entertaining to watch. He's very fidgety on the bike, extremely fidgety on the bike, and there's been times where it looks like his escape cannot succeed, but it does because he pushes the envelope, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I get the feeling that he's really getting gains by braking late into corners and the like. Would you feel the same?
Yeah, look, Julian is he's a class act, and not only is he a big engine, he's got skills. He's got amazing skills on the bike. Everybody raves about Peter Sagan, but there's a whole heap of riders in the peloton with skills just as good. And Julian Alaphilippe is one of those. He's got the attitude where he'll give it or die trying, 100% or die trying. So he's the kind of guy that he's happy to throw it all away just as long as he gave it the max. And he's been since day one. He turned professional with me into a down under in Quick Step. So his first race was the Down Under Classic where he was working for me as a sprinter. So I know him really well, but definitely, he just doesn't give up, and he takes all the risks. And his skills on the bike, he turned up as a Neo Pro and he started doing monos and skids and jumping up gutters, and pretty quickly I pulled him into line and said, if you're going to do that, then it's going to be that set of wheels for the whole week, because I'm not running the risk of getting that set of wheels in my bike after you're acting like that. So he's just one of those guys that, the media portray him how he is. He's, fun loving, he's jumping left and right, he's always up to something, and he's the same in a team.
Could you tell in that Down Under Classic that he was going to have the career that he's gone on to have?
Well, he nearly didn't have a career because I grabbed him so hard after the race and said, don't ever try that again, because it was the last corner and he dived underneath me between Andre Groppel and myself with 250 metres to go in the Down Under Classic. So, as a Neo Pro, when you dive in under your leader in the last corner in the first race of the year, it didn't go down too well. So, we had a pretty quick team meeting after that and said, don't do that again. But, it was only onward and upward for him, and it was a downward trend for me. So we were at either end of the spectrum, and he was going up and I was going down. But, amazing bike rider, and, he's a real world champion.
Strange that we had a little chat about Alaphilippe while we're looking at a Cervélo, but anyway, these things can happen when we're talking amongst bike riders. I have a question about the rotor cranks. So you talked about the power meter saying it was a good one. Why was it good? And with the hard edge on the crank, do you ever bang the inner ankle?
I was pretty lucky with that. My foot position was pretty straight, pretty standard, not really heel in like a lot of guys. So I never had problems hitting the cranks. But
you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, so a lot of guys hit the heels on the inside of the cranks. Look, Cavendish is probably one of the worst I've seen because he moves a lot in the pedals. But
does that mean he's a yellow cleat and you're a red cleat?
I run red, absolutely. He was running red, but he clicks in and out a lot.
Right.
You use red just because you put more power out. There's less movement, so just that little bit of gain from the red cleat, but he likes to click in and out a lot, and he rolls in a lot. But this crank I found pretty nice. It's pretty accurate for in my opinion, for the few years I used rotor cranks, they were really accurate. We used them on training peaks, so it was good to analyse the power meter. But look, honestly, if you can stay with the whole Dura-Ace group set, it's better, but teams they have to find money, and when they can either pay for a Dura-Ace power meter or they can get given money to ride a rotor crank, that's how they make the funding gaps in teams. So all in all, I was happy with the rotor cranks, left and right power, reliable, didn't have to charge them too much and never had any big issues. So yeah, solid tick of approval for the Rotor cranks. But still, if you can have a full Dura-Ace group set, you definitely do that.
Talk to me just quickly about ENVE. On this one we've got ENVE bars, ENVE stem, ENVE wheels, that's probably about it, but it's a company that's making a bit of headway.
Yeah, so they came to the team, relatively unknown. They were still quite known, but in the Pro Peloton I think we were one of the first teams they were sponsoring. The wheels were exceptional. Early on, reliability was really good. The carbon they were using was quite good. As you mentioned, we used the bar and stem combo, and with that stem there was an insert that you could move in 4 different directions to angle the stem. So, they were one of the first, to bring up that insert. With just a flip of the insert, you could change the stem 2.5 millimeters in length, and you could change the angle. So there was a lot of new things they brought. But just the quality, the finish, and the quality of the wheels, I was pretty happy to ride those.
Thanks very much.
All right.
It's good fun, eh?
No, it's good. Walk down memory lane.